Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Emily Carter was a woman of disarming simplicity, a gentleness personified that seemed almost timeless. Her life didn't shine in the spotlight of luxury or social events. She owned no glittering jewelry or designer clothes. Yet, in this modest setting she had carefully constructed for herself, she found a sincere and profound happiness. Every morning, Emily left their Chicago apartment, a small space on the third floor of an old building, its walls a little tired, but where the morning light filtered through the white curtains. She spent her days at the public library, where she worked as an assistant. Surrounded by books, stories, and silences, she loved this refuge where one could travel without moving, dream without fear, and above all, lose oneself in the richness of words. In the evenings, after her day's work, Emily returned to her peaceful routine. Sitting by the window, she often watched the rain fall on the cobblestones of the street. The drops formed ephemeral rivers that meandered until they disappeared, carrying with them the small worries of everyday life. In these moments, a novel open on her knees, she felt at home, calm, happy in the simplicity that was uniquely hers. That morning, however, the air seemed thick with a slight but palpable tension. Emily was preparing to leave for New York, where she would join her husband, David. David Carter was a quiet businessman, one of those guys you pass by without really noticing, except that behind that quiet facade hid a secret few knew. He was the majority owner of Skyward Airlines, one of the largest airlines in the United States. David had always shunned the media spotlight, preferring to devote himself to his work and protect their privacy. He hid behind his success, avoiding the spotlight, interviews, and social gatherings. Emily respected this discretion. She herself disliked pomp or ostentatious appearances. She had chosen a simple outfit that day, a beige trench coat, a little worn around the edges, and a navy blue scarf that kept her warm. Her leather bag, worn by the years, contained just the essentials: her electronic ticket, a small notebook, and her phone. She had the reassuring calm of someone who knows what she wants, without trying to impose herself. When the plane opened to her, Emily entered the first-class cabin with natural serenity. She settled into her seat, a small smile on her lips, ready to experience a peaceful flight, far from any hustle and bustle. But she had barely put down her bag when Rachel, a 30-something hostess with a fixed smile, approached her. There was more constraint than kindness in that smile. "Ma'am, your ticket appears to be incorrect," Rachel said, her voice polite but icy. "First class is reserved for passengers who have purchased a premium ticket. May I see your boarding pass?" Emily calmly took out her phone, scrolled down, and showed the e-ticket. "Here," she said simply, her gaze clear and calm. But Rachel frowned. Then her expression hardened slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this ticket is not valid for this section." All around, the looks turned suspicious, some heavy, others curious, some even downright contemptuous. A woman sitting nearby, dressed in a chic suit and sporting perfect makeup, whispered to her neighbor, "She must have cheated. Look how she's dressed." The murmur turned into whispers that, though quiet, seemed to sting Emily like thorns. She felt her heart clench, but she tried to remain calm. "I assure you," she said, her voice soft but betraying a hint of anxiety, "this ticket is in my name. I travel often with Skyward Airlines." But Rachel, visibly supported by her colleague Jake, a steward with a closed and unfriendly face, exchanged a knowing look with him. The latter nodded before signaling to a security guard posted nearby. "Madam, please follow us," Rachel ordered, this time not at all gently. Emily felt a mixture of injustice, embarrassment, and pain rise within her. She stood slowly, aware that the entire cabin was now looking at her, as if she were an intruder about to be unmasked. The corridor leading out of the first-class cabin seemed to lengthen with every step Emily took, as if the space were warping under the weight of the stairs she felt bearing down on her. These stairs, heavy with judgment, suspicion, and sometimes even contempt, pierced her like invisible arrows. Each step echoed strangely in the narrow tunnel, amplifying the tense silence. A few seats away, an impeccably suited businessman, a confident-looking man with graying hair, slowly straightened up. He looked condescendingly at Emily and said in a loud, blade-like voice, "How disrespectful. She has absolutely no place here." This sentence, spoken with such misplaced confidence, triggered a murmur of approval from the cabin. Some nodded discreetly, others exchanged knowing glances, as if the mere sight of a modest-looking woman in this section reserved for the rich and powerful was an insult to their rank. But despite this oppressive atmosphere, Emily's eyes shone with a quiet strength and indomitable dignity. Her chest swelled, and she slowly raised her head, facing these invisible judgments with silent nobility. In a soft but firm voice, she replied, without anger, but with the conviction of one who knows her truth, "I haven't wronged anyone. I'm just another passenger." The murmuring faded, but the tension didn't ease. The security guard, a heavy-set man with a grim face, seemed torn between duty and a hesitation he couldn't ignore. Yet he leaned toward her and, with a discreet but firm gesture, gently pushed her toward the exit. Emily took one last step toward the cabin door, her heart pounding but her mind clear, ready for whatever came. Then, suddenly, a firm, authoritative voice rose in the heavy silence. "Stop!" All eyes turned toward the source of the voice. An elegant man, dressed in a tailored dark suit, stepped forward confidently. His upright posture and calm, yet resolute face immediately commanded respect. It was David Carter, Emily's husband. The room seemed to freeze, the tension evaporating almost instantly, replaced by a mixture of astonishment and awe mixed with embarrassment. David looked at Rachel and Jake, the two staff members, and asked in a clear, calm but authoritative voice, "Rachel, Jake, explain to me what's going on here." Rachel, taken aback, stammered, searching for words, her confidence crumbling. "Mr. Carter, it's just, she's not a first-class passenger." David didn't look away, his hard, penetrating gaze seemed to weigh on them like a silent judgment. "Emily has a valid ticket," he said slowly, emphasizing each word. "She has always flown Skyward Airlines. And I remind you that I am the principal owner of this company. I will not accept my wife being treated this way, here or anywhere else." An awkward and heavy silence fell. The passengers who, a moment earlier, had been whispering, mocking, or exchanging prejudiced glances suddenly felt uncomfortable. Some glances quickly averted, others lingered a little longer, filled with confusion and shame. Emily, standing beside David, felt her courage rise. She exchanged a knowing glance with him, then looked around, aware that this moment marked much more than a simple quarrel over a seat on a plane. That day, in that narrow corridor, she had faced not only stares, but also prejudice, hasty judgments, and arrogance hidden beneath the veneer of luxury. And thanks to the silent strength of the man she loved, that injustice was about to begin to crack. In their private suite on the top floor of a discreet but prestigious Manhattan hotel, the evening calm contrasted with the inner turmoil Emily still felt. The windows offered a spectacular view of the lights of New York, but Emily wasn't looking at them. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, silent since their arrival. The tea David had made her was slowly cooling on the coffee table. David, for his part, watched her tenderly. He knew this silence. He knew it wasn't empty, but laden with thoughts, memories, and suppressed pain. He sat down gently beside her, without a word, and waited for her to speak. Finally, Emily's voice broke the silence, fragile, almost broken. "I don't understand why they did this." Her eyes filled with tears, not just from sadness, but from a kind of weariness. A weariness that only the repetition of silent humiliations can engender. "I had my ticket. I was on time. I smiled, I was polite. And yet," David took her hands in his and squeezed them gently. "It wasn't you they saw, Emily. It wasn't your smile, your kindness, your honesty. They didn't want to see any of that. They saw a woman without finery, without luxury logos, without flashy makeup. A simple woman, without pretension. And they let their prejudices speak for them." Emily slowly turned her head towards him. Her eyes shone with a discreet fire, mixed with pain and dignity. "I don't want to be seen as someone who doesn't deserve her place. I don't want to be respected just because I'm your wife, David. I want to be recognized for who I am." For who I am. David took a deep breath. He knew she was right. Too often, even in his professional circle, He'd seen looks change when people learned who she was. I know, and you're right to want this. But the world isn't yet ready to see the value without the label. This is a fight bigger than us, but we're going to fight it. For you. For all those who suffer this kind of injustice every day, in silence. He kissed her on the forehead, as if to seal a promise. The days that followed were pivotal. David, though usually discreet, made a rare decision. He called a meeting with Skyward Airlines Executive Committee. He played the footage of the incident captured by the plane's internal cameras. Without raising his voice, he calmly but firmly explained what the event revealed: deep-seated prejudices, silent biases, a corporate culture that needed reevaluating. Under his leadership, an internal awareness campaign was launched. All employees, from flight crew to sales managers, received new training focused on service ethics, universal respect, and inclusion. Emily, though hesitant at first, agreed to participate in one of the seminars. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but she quickly found her groove. She recounted her experience not with anger, but with clarity and humanity, and it touched. The response was overwhelming. One flight attendant burst into tears after hearing her story. A young flight attendant wrote a letter thanking Emily for opening his eyes. Her testimony, quiet but powerful, circulated throughout the airline industry. But Emily and David didn't stop there. Together, they decided to create a foundation, the Carter Initiative for Equal Service. The goal: to combat discrimination in all service sectors, whether aviation, hospitality, catering, or education. The foundation offered awareness programs, interventions in large companies, and a hotline to anonymously collect reports of abuse or unequal treatment. Emily, now in demand for interviews, spoke with the same simplicity that had sparked the incident. Her speech was never accusatory. She didn't cry for revenge. She spoke of humanity, dignity, equality. One evening after a lecture at Columbia University, a student approached her with tears in her eyes. "You gave me courage, Mrs. Carter. I was afraid of being invisible. Today, I feel legitimate." Emily smiled, moved. She had never sought the light, but by crossing it, she had made it useful. And every time she flew from then on, a flight attendant recognized her. Not as the boss's wife, but as Emily Carter, the simple woman who had dared to say no to humiliation and changed an industry without ever shouting. A few months later, on a clear spring morning, Emily Carter stood outside Gate 17B at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Same airport, same airline, but a completely different atmosphere. There was something different in the air, more than just a light breeze. It was the weight of a transformed past, a rewritten memory. Dressed in a cream coat and a sky-blue linen scarf, Emily stood straight, her eyes distractedly following the movements of the ground staff. She wasn't nervous or tense, but deeply aware of the moment. This trip wasn't simply a destination to San Francisco, where she was to give a lecture on ethics and public services. It was a return. A return to the very site of humiliation, now a symbol of redemption. As she crossed the jetway and entered the plane's cabin, she was greeted by a young stewardess with a sincere smile. "Miss Carter, welcome aboard. It's an honor to have you with us." A gentle warmth rose within her. She nodded gratefully and was shown to her first-class seat. The same kind of chair she'd been forced to leave, but this time, without judgment, without tension, without murmurs. Around her, the passengers greeted her respectfully. Some recognized her. Others might not have known her name, but had heard of this simple woman who had transformed an entire airline with her dignity alone. She sat down quietly, placed her handbag under the seat in front of her, and peered out the window. Outside, the vehicles on the tarmac seemed almost to slow down, as if the world was taking a moment to breathe with her. But what had changed most wasn't the staff's attitude. It was the collective atmosphere, the new energy that pervaded the cabin. The staff had been trained. Skyward Airlines' internal posters now displayed the slogan, "Every passenger is a person, not an appearance." Emily had never wanted public recognition, yet her experience had sparked a movement. What she had experienced, the silent exclusion, the judgment based on appearance, had become the starting point for a profound cultural shift. Testimonies had poured in, from nurses in uniforms who were frowned upon in luxury hotels, from teachers mistaken for intruders, from customers treated like fraudsters in shops because they didn't have the style. All found Emily to be a silent but strong figure, who didn't speak loudly, but whose actions cried out for justice. And in that moment, on that plane, Emily realized that her ticket was no longer just a piece of paper or a QR code. It had become a symbol of dignity, because she had not given in, a symbol of respect, because she had looked her accusers in the eye, without hatred, a symbol of equality, because she had decided that no one, ever, should be defined by their appearance. She closed her eyes for a moment. The plane's engines roared softly, and as the plane lifted onto the runway, Emily smiled. She knew that on the ground, thousands of other Emilys, anonymous, discreet, invisible, walked the corridors of airports, schools, restaurants, prouder, freer, because one woman had once refused to lower her gaze. She hadn't won a war. She had sown a seed, and the world began to bloom.